Okay. So, um, yeah, I had another realization um, a couple days before the last video I found, and um, I documented it on video, but I found it to be potentially unrelatable, and I had to think and apply thought to try and um, find a way to talk about it that and in talking about it, it's a kind of partial very incomplete representation on the part of the one who's experiencing, and trying to explain something that's entirely beyond words, but also transcends words, also includes words. So I'll touch on it briefly. So basically, the I noticed a movement. I noticed a space or a duality or a distinction, and that's basically when I talked about awakening felt like coming home. It was that duality between experience and home, the perceiver and the perceived, a reference point. I felt like I was at times moving into experience, and that moving into experience, I noticed I kept coming back home, coming back to this stability, this kind of level continuum, this ground of being, this awareness of being that structured everything, gave it some kind of security, dependability, gave it some solidity and a kind of personality in a way. And I noticed that movement, and I was doing a workout in the garden. I was doing some exercise, and moving into the experience and merging with the senses. That movement, I noticed, and I felt like I would be lost in the movement. That's why I kept coming back, because it was stable. That experience was like a stable screen, like a 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional holographic structure, solidity, that was very comfortable to fall back on. And then the experience was the spontaneity of experience was moving and changing constantly, as part of that, but almost separate from it. And the experience pulled me into it, and then there was no longer there was no longer, and this is where it's impossible to talk about this, because there's no longer the reference point. The subject was gone, the subject is lost for a while, and then it reappeared, but it reappeared without any inherent existence, without any solidity, just like a macro version of the individual self reappears, but it no longer has that. There's no longer a belief in it. It's less real, and I noticed that this was a mechanism, this was a deeply ingrained protection mechanism to kind of instill some sort of stability, some sort of continuum across and behind time and space that seemed to link everything together and make it comfortable. And in a way, I mistook the mess of experience, the instability of that, the spontaneity of that, as a thought or thoughts or something. There was a reluctance or a refusal to accept or move into that instability, that uncertainty, and that spontaneity. But the aliveness that's there, the freedom that's there when we can let the continuum just drop away, just let the home burn down in a sense, let the infinite ground of being, the infinite awareness of being, when we can pass through it. It felt like being pulled into experience, and because there was a movement there, because there was someone who's being pulled or something that was being pulled, that gap closed and then it disappeared, just lost in the paradoxical mess of reality, and that awareness of being, that stability, that presence or the perceiver was obscuring the immediate reality in a way, in a very, very subtle way. It was obscuring I could describe it as like close, fine, spontaneity. It's like it's almost like time takes on a different quality when time is experienced. It's almost like space takes on a different quality when it's experienced. I can't describe it, and I noticed that there were a lot of thought paradigms that were seemingly linked to this frame, this lens of the eternal perceiver, this kind of singular holographic entity that manifests all reality, all form, all space, but also includes and transcends it. It was almost like slowing things down. It kind of felt like it was almost like holding experience, holding reality. That's what it felt like. A very subtle sense of a centre from a different reference point. Yeah, so that's the gist of it. And now it becomes infinitely difficult or impossible to talk about this, because it's clear to me now that this whole journey, it just becomes more and more simple, less and less complicated, more and more obvious. Pardon me. And the obvious part about it is that wasn't so obvious before, is that when we let go of these thoughts, these attachments, these assumptions about the nature of reality and our experience and the experiencer, when we let go of them, they don't cease to exist, and it's like everything is the same. Everything exists simultaneously, and everything moves through and includes itself simultaneously without any sort of barriers or distinctions. It just becomes more raw. The experience, the sensory perception, just becomes more raw and more raw, and that's that really is it's unbelievably. It's beyond simple. Simple doesn't even begin to touch it as a description. It's like hitting a paradox that just the ultimate paradox that just renders everything invisible, but at the same time it's still there, it still exists. Like the eternal subject, the watcher, is still there, the ego is still there, the thoughts are still there, everything's still there. They've just been seen through. They're not the object of attention, they're not the filter that is used to project an idea or an assumption onto this experience. That's all it is. It's unbelievably simple. It's so simple. It's so simple. And with that, a lot of worries drop away as well. A lot of distinctions, separation, resistance just drops away. It's just not there anymore. But I wanted to talk about the exercise that I was doing. So what it felt like was, I think exercise is a medium that's not used as much as it could be, because I found it really useful, because it's a very sensory based activity that requires a lot of attention, that requires spontaneous reaction, and these movements are practiced, say in sport or whatever, to the point where they become automatic, and that autonomy, the autonomy and the agency, the line blurs a little bit, and you can release yourself into the sensory experience. I think that's a very potent practice. So like, for example, in the previous video I talked about hobbies. People would do any sort of something physical, something that's sensory, something that involves all of the senses, and also requires concentration and attention. Through practicing that, I think it could be like a supercharged version of meditation, because let's say all the components are there that would pull you into your direct experience in a very acute, attentive way, and that's basically the mechanism that I felt there. It was like this stable ground of being, this continuum, this home, coming back to, and then moving out from, coming back to, and then that movement eventually just collapsed, and then all distinctions disappeared for a bit. And it can be easier to practice that when meditation isn't the isn't the focus. because then again you're blurring the lines, you're losing that distinction, and I think there's some value in that. But it just becomes more and more clear that give attention to and appreciation to and joy and love to your immediate reality as much as possible, just as much as possible. That's what it's all about. It doesn't matter about the labels, the enlightenment, the am I awake, am I not awake, am I suffering, am I liberated, and so on, because when you get down to it, that's just part of the picture. And transcending that, then none of that matters anymore, really. Although there is, it's a beautiful journey and it's a fantastic experience, or path, or whatever you'd like to call it, but just appreciate, just acutely appreciate your direct experience, or whatever it is, without wishing it was different, without rejecting parts of yourself or saying this is wrong, without labeling. Just keep releasing, seeing through, keep releasing and seeing through. When you're not here, come back here. I think that's a good way to put it initially. When you're not here, come back here and just be, just experience, and just enjoy this. Cultivate like a hobby from it, from just really being here, really not letting anything be taken for granted. Don't wish away the moment. Just enjoy the experience. That's it, really. It's as simple as that. So, anyway, that'll do it for now. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that I had these expectations and these ideas about the ego, the mind, thoughts, reality, experience, perception, and the awakening that I was stuck to as well. So I expected that, and I'd heard people describe and explain that after the realization of no self, you don't experience a subject-object division. You don't experience a self at all. The ego doesn't exist. The ego never returns. The eternal witness is dead and never comes back. And it's not, at least it's not like that for me. The ego is still there. The self can still be experienced. The eternal witness, the subject-object division is still there, can still be experienced. There's no resistance to these anymore. They've been penetrated and transcended. There's no criteria, there's no labeling of experience. So for example, subject-object division can be experienced. The difference is it doesn't have to be experienced in a certain way. Experience doesn't have to happen according to a set of criteria or a set of expectations or assumptions. There's just nothing. There's just nothing. All the thoughts, all the ideas, all the assumptions become clear, and the whole of reality just moves through itself within itself, as itself, simultaneously, without end, infinitely. And the whole idea of enlightenment is just an idea. Enlightenment is just a thought. It's an idea, it's a concept, obviously. When something is transcended, when something is exposed to be an illusion, it's still there. It's all still there. And there's an amazement in that, and a love in that now, that I can move through these experiences as the experiencer, as the ego, as a separate identity, without being stuck to them, or without being stuck to a spiritual identity, without having to be stuck to a way of experiencing that says, I am spiritual, I am awake, I am an individual that's awakening, I am the eternal witness, I am the eternal ground of being. It doesn't have to be anything. There is no limit, there's no end point. It just goes on and on and on and on. Infinitely. There's no end to it. It's beyond but including, penetrating and transcending absolutely everything, all at once, without any distinctions or borders or reference points or anything. And then everything can be seen to be an idea, and there are no more, although I can never say there aren't any more because you wouldn't be aware of them anyway, but there are no more hidden thoughts, hidden assumptions that we're half aware of but we continue with because they are comfortable, because they're convenient, because they maintain some sort of solidity or identity that resists in some way, if that makes sense. I just thought I'd pop that in at the end there.